And how are you employed, ma'am?
I'm employed at the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Laboratory Division.
Okay. And what is your occupation at the FBI laboratory?
I'm a supervisory forensic document examiner.
And how long have you been employed there?
I've been employed at the Federal Bureau of Investigation since 1992, just shy of 20 years.
And can you please share with the ladies and gentlemen of the jury your educational background?
Yes, I received a Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology from the George Washington University in Washington, D.C., and a Master of Science in Forensic Science from National University in San Diego, California.
And what is the nature of question documents? What does that mean?
Well, as a question document examiner, I examine all different types of documentary evidence. That would include handwriting, hand printing, printing processes, typewriting, plastic bags, shredded paper, torn paper, alterations, obliterations, charred documents, and liquid soap documents. For example, I compare those items with question items with known items for the purpose of trying to determine the question item's authenticity or origin.
And what kind of training do you have in that area?
Well, to become a document examiner at the FBI laboratory, I underwent an intensive training program there at the FBI laboratory. The training included classroom instruction, reading from related books and journals. I attended professional meetings. I went and toured factories. I took tests. I had oral boards. And most importantly, I worked actual cases under the guidance and supervision of actual certified document examiners.
And is question documents not just relating to documents, it relates to a whole different field, does it not? A whole different field, different types of materials, I guess is what I'm asking.
Well, it doesn't necessarily need to be on documents. Sometimes writing can be on different types of surfaces. For example, sometimes a person might write a threat on a bathroom wall, for example, so I might examine the writing on a wall, graffiti, that type of thing. So any type of writing might be on a different substrate. I mentioned torn edges or torn items. It could be some type of packaging that needs to be put back together. So it doesn't necessarily need to be a document. It could be other types of substrates that I look at. So it's not necessarily documents, but it's included in the question documents unit.
And do you belong to any professional organizations?
Yes. I'm a member of the Mid-Atlantic Association of Forensic Scientists. I'm a member of the American Society for Testing and Materials. And I'm also an assessor for ASCLD Lab, which is the American for ASCLD Lab, which is the organization which accredits the laboratories.
Is that the American Society of Crime Laboratory
Directors Laboratory Accreditation Board, thank you. I just drew a blank for a second. And that's international. And I think that's it for now.
Okay. Have you ever been admitted as an expert witness to testify on question documents in court?
Yes, I have.
How many times?
Well, I'm not exactly sure, but somewhere more than 20, maybe 20 to 25 times.
And has that been throughout the country in both state and federal courts?
Yes, I've testified in federal courts and state courts and also in Canada.
At this time, Your Honor, the defense would move to have Ms. Gottesman admitted as an expert in question documents.
No objection from the state.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the witness will be accepted as an expert witness in the area of question document examination. You may proceed.
Thank you, sir. Do you, in the course of your work with certain instruments?
Yes, I do.
Can you name some of the instruments that you work with?
Yes, there's certain tools that I work with regularly in my unit. One would be the ESDA machine, that's the electrostatic detection apparatus, and that's used to detect indented writing on documents. Another would be the video spectral comparator, that's also known as the VSC, video spectral comparator.
And what is that? What is that instrument?
That is a tool that document examiners use for a variety of reasons. That is basically a tool that is comprised of a variety of lights and filters, a camera, a computer, and a monitor. And using those different lights and filters, I'm able to see different parts of the spectrum of light and detect different things depending on what it is that I'm actually looking for on the document.
If I can have it. Items. I'd like to refer you to your report on December 22nd, 2008. Did you receive any items to test in this case?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And what items did you receive?
At that particular time, I received 3 pieces of tape, actually duct tape. They were identified as items Q62 through items Q64.
And what is your understanding that where these items came from?
It was my understanding that they came from the victim herself.
Do you have your report with you?
Yes, I do.
Okay. With the court's permission, can you look at your report and see exactly where the items were supposed to have come from?
Yes.
You may.
Thank you. It says that these items were received from the medical examiner's office.
Okay. And these were the items admitted into evidence, Q62 through Q64, which I believe are...
State's Exhibit 302, Counsel.
302. Now, what were you asked to do or to look on these pieces of duct tape for?
The purpose of my examination with respect to these 3 items was to determine if I was able to detect a heart-shaped sticker or a sticker or any remnants from this sticker.
And did you use the video spectral comparator?
Yes, I did.
Okay. I'd like to now show you Defense Exhibit AU as a demonstrative aid. I don't believe we have an objection from the state, Judge. May I?
Is it? Counsel was talking about the photographs on that page,
Correct.
not the text.
Correct.
If she feels that she needs it, then I have no objection to it.
Okay.
I'd like to show you certain items so you can explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury how this, I'll zoom in, so.
Could we just cover the text part, since that's not really before the jury?
Sure.
Because I didn't think that was needed, it's just for the, thanks.
No problem. Okay. Can I publish to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Judge?
Any objection to that being published as demonstrative aid?
No, sir.
Okay, we will publish.
Okay, the VCS, correct? that what
It's
it's
the
called?
VSC.
VSC, sorry. The VSC, can you explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what they're looking at here and how this machine helps you in the course of your work?
Sure. The VSC, as I briefly explained, has a series of lights and filters. And what it does is it allows our eyes to see things that we wouldn't normally allow it to see. Our eyes as human beings see things between 400 and 700 nanometers. And we see things as different colors. We either see things as white if the light is reflected. We see things as black if the light is absorbed. And we see things as colors if it's a combination of absorption and reflection. That's between 400 and 700 nanometers. If we go outside of the 400 and 700 nanometers into the ultraviolet or infrared spectrum, which is before the 400 nanometers or above the 700 nanometers, which where we don't see light, that our eyes can't see it, but using these special lights and filters, we can allow our eyes to see things that we wouldn't normally see. So basically, by putting these documents under those lights and filters, we're able to see things without disturbing the documents or changing the documents that we wouldn't normally see. So basically, this is an example of just putting documents inside the video spectral comparator, which is just a box, and looking at these documents. And you can see with the naked eye, they would have just been white paper, but putting them in perhaps under ultraviolet light, they react differently, where one document is brighter than the other four. So in this particular case, there might have been, say, a 4-page contract or a 4-page will where there might have been a suspected insertion of a page. And in this particular case, one page is different than the other 3. We couldn't see that with the naked eye, but just using some different lights and filters that we wouldn't normally see with our own eyes, and just using this tool to aid us to see something that is outside of that 400 to 700 spectrum, we can see something that we wouldn't normally see.
So if somebody tried to pull a fast one on a will, you could spot it by using this instrument?
Right, it could be indicated that there's a different piece of paper.
Okay. And what does this example here show?
Well, this is an example on our right is shredded paper without using any different light except for normal everyday light. Then if you put it in the VSC, you can see that some of the pieces of shred are reacting differently than other pieces of the shred. And in our unit, we do put shredded paper back together. And so we can use this as a method to sort the paper. So it helps us to put the paper back together quickly if we can sort the pages by how they react in the VSC. We know which pages may go back together and which pages don't belong together.
Okay. And what about this example? What does this show you?
Well, this shows, again, on the right is a document that's been cut. There's two pieces where the page is cut using the regular light, and then on the left are those two pieces, again, in the video spectral comparator, and there's some little paper fibers that are luminescing under the video spectral comparator, and we can use that to connect the pieces of paper back together, because these random paper fibers are actually in the paper, but they can't be seen with the naked eye. But using the VSC, we can see those paper fibers and show that those pieces of paper were at one time attached, because we can match them by these fluorescing or luminescing paper fibers.
And the last example that I'll ask you to explain, it appears something with matches here. What is that?
Yes, well, matches from a matchbook have a lot of impurities and debris inside the matches, because all that happens is you strike a match and then throw the match away. So when they make matches, it's kind of the bottom of the barrel as far as paper is concerned. So there's a lot of impurities and debris in that paper. And because of that, there's a lot of fillers, and those fillers fluoresce under the ultraviolet light. So if there was, say, an arson case and that match is left at the crime scene, and they get a suspect and they can find the matchbook either on the subject's in their pocket or back at their house, we can match those up again by the bottom. It's maybe a little hard to see here, but there's again some fluorescing pieces that we can line up using the video spectral comparator.
Okay. Tell us how you used the VSC in this case.
Well, in this case, I was unable to see any sticker or sticker fragment with the naked eye. So I went to the video spectral comparator to see if I could find any sticker fragment or remnants from the sticker using the video spectral comparator with some of the different lights and filters, where I wasn't able to see it with the naked eye.
Would that include residue as well?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. Thinking that perhaps it was out of the normal range of my abilities, out of the 400 to 700 nanometers. So that was my thought, my intention.
Okay. And can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what the results of your examination were?
Well, after trying all of the different lights and different filters, I was unable to detect any sticker or sticker fragment, sticker residue, utilizing the VSC.
Okay. Was there any evidence whatsoever of a sticker there on any of these pieces of duct tape? Now, after you had conducted your examination, were you ever asked to submit a DNA sample?
Yes.
Okay. And what was the reason for that?
Well, about a month later or so, I got a call from one of the analysts in the DNA unit, and she said that they had an unknown profile from one of the pieces of tape, and they were unable to eliminate it from anybody in their unit, and I suppose they have elimination samples, and it wasn't any of the suspects, so they wanted to know if they could get mine, and I readily complied.
Did you later find out that it was your profile on the duct tape?
I did, and it was.
Okay. Now, when you handled these items of evidence, did you handle them with care?
Yes.
And what precautions did you use when handling these items?
Our normal procedure is to wear gloves, and that is what I did.
Okay. And can you recall a situation where you believe you might have contaminated the duct tape? Or do you have no?
No, I have no idea how it happened or when in this particular case.
You at no time sneezed on it or anything like that?
No, sir.
Okay. And when you scanned these items, were they in protective plastic protectors?
Yes, in looking back at my scanned images, I did notice that they were scanned in their in the glassine, which is a protective plastic.
Okay. And throughout the entire time that you had these items of evidence, you of course exercised great care.
Yes.
Were you given other tests to run on any other items in this case?
Yes, I received other items later.
Okay. And I'd want to direct your attention to April 2nd, your report of April 2nd, 2008. And per stipulation, Judge, these items, I will just speak generally of them. Can you tell the ladies and gentlemen,
From the state?
I believe we've listed the items in evidence by evidence number. I provided those to counsel. Those would be the items she's referring to. But there are items in evidence that probably should, just for the record, be designated so we're clear what we're talking about.
Sure.
Just some garbage bags.
and what we're referring to are states 294 through 299.
And I guess somebody's going to tell us what they are.
Yes, sir.
Okay. You may continue.
Can you tell us what you did, what you were asked to do in this report? If you want to refer to it, go ahead.
Okay, in the whole entire report?
Yes.
I was given a number of different pieces of plastic, and I was basically asked to just give an overall assessment of the plastic, as well as to compare some of the pieces of plastic with some of the other pieces of plastic.
And what were your ultimate conclusions? Were you able to make any matches on any of the plastic?
No, some of the pieces of plastic I was able to eliminate as having originated from one another, and others I was inconclusive on.
Okay. Were you able to match any of the plastic bags from the residence to the scene off Suburban Drive?
No.
I have no further questions, Judge.
Cross-examination?
You received the tape that was referred to a moment ago, States Exhibit 302, after the latent print unit had already examined it. Is that your understanding?
Yes.
So they had examined it, noted something, processed it, went back, tried to photograph it and find it. They couldn't photograph it and find it. You tried to find it. You couldn't find it either.
That's right.
That's the sum of that. As far as the bags, you were given a whole bunch of bags purportedly, and I'll fill this in, Judge, taken from the Anthony residence and compared them to some bags from the scene where the body was found. Is that generally what you were asked to do about these garbage bags?
There was just a couple of bags that I compared from, there was 5 bags from the residence that I compared to 2 items from the medical examiner's office. All of the bags from the scene, I didn't conduct a comparison.
The two items were two
There
black plastic bags from the medical examiner's office. Is that correct?
Can you say that again?
Sorry. The two items from the medical examiner's office, those were two black plastic bags. Is that correct?
Yes.
Just want the jury to understand what we've been talking about.
Yes. And then there were two plastic bags that were known bags from the crime scene that I examined. But the majority of those bags from the crime scene, I didn't conduct a comparison of.
Okay. But in answering counsel's question, you were talking about looking at the bags from the medical examiner's office, comparing them to bags from the Anthony house.
Right.
Is that correct? Okay. And you said, and the way you would compare bags is you would look at the fracture patterns in the ends of the bags to see if they could match up.
There's not quite, there's actually machine impressions in the bag as well as impurities in the bag that cross over from one to the other. So it's not actually a torn,
Okay.
it's not actually a tear on the end.
So some of them you can say, no, these were not from the same roll as the bags from the ME, and some it was just inconclusive, maybe, maybe not.
Right. Some were actually different in class characteristics. Maybe one was brown and one was black.
Right.
Those I could eliminate completely.
Right. But the other ones, it's just, you could be, maybe, maybe not.
Right.
No further questions.
Any redirect?
We were talking about the duct tape, ma'am. You mentioned that you were asked to, that DNA was going to be compared from the suspects. Did they indicate who the suspects were?
Sorry, objection. I don't believe she was asking about DNA comparison in cross.
It's about the duct tape. No further questions.
Anyone to be excused?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. You may be excused.
Thank you. May I go back to?
Yes, you may be excused and
Yeah, she
return
can go back to
home.
Virginia. May we approach briefly before the next witness is
Yes,
called?
you may.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
How are you employed, sir?
I'm currently employed as the section chief of the scientific analysis section of the FBI laboratory. Prior to that, I served as the unit chief of the firearms tool marks unit, unit chief of the trace evidence unit, and prior to that, I served as a forensic examiner in the trace evidence unit.
And how long have you been employed with the FBI?
I've been with the FBI just over 15 years.
And what is your educational background?
I have a bachelor's degree in biology and a Master of Science degree in entomology.
And have you received any specialized training in your field?
Yes, as a trace evidence examiner, specifically I was a hair and fiber examiner. I received over a year of on-the-job training at the FBI laboratory that involved lots of reading of scientific papers, books, lots of microscope time looking at different hair samples, fiber samples, learning how to identify hairs and fibers, then comparing hairs and fibers to each other and to known samples, oral examinations, microscopic examinations. At the completion of that training program, I was qualified as an examiner within the trace evidence unit, specifically within the field of hairs and fibers.
And when this case, did you receive any, well, actually before that, Your Honor, at this time I would move, unless there's any objection, to have Mr. Owen admitted as an expert in hair and fiber analysis.
No objection.
Ladies and gentlemen, the jury, the witness will be accepted as an expert witness in the area of hair and fiber analysis. You may continue.
When, in September of 2008, where were you working at?
At that time, I was the unit chief of the trace evidence unit, which means I was managing all of the trace evidence unit personnel, the forensic examiners and the physical scientists who work in the unit.
And would that include both Karen Lowe and Stephen Shaw?
Yes, it would.
Okay. And you were asked to conduct an examination in this case, were you not?
I did conduct an examination on this case, yes.
Okay. Tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what you did.
On this submission of evidence?
Correct. I'm specifically referring to your report of September 12th, 2008.
A submission of evidence came into the laboratory. In this specific instance, the primary examiner, Ms. Lowe, was not present in the laboratory. As I was still a qualified examiner within the discipline, I was taking proficiency tests. I had an opportunity to conduct the analysis so that the evidence could move on and flow throughout the rest of the laboratory. The item of evidence was a shovel. I believe, may I look at my notes?
Yes,
quickly?
please.
The state and the defense have agreed that the shovel is in fact the one testified to by Mr. Berner earlier in the trial.
I would agree.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Specifically, it was our designation of Q46, a shovel. It was received into the trace evidence unit for a mineralogic examination, one of the other disciplines within trace evidence, but there were stickers on the shovel. Now, stickers are very good receptors of trace evidence. They're sticky, they hold on to things. So just as a normal course of events, because these stickers were present, even though the shovel was submitted for a mineralogic examination, we wanted to have a hair and fiber examiner take a look at that piece of evidence also. So I went into the processing room with the mineralogy examiner, examined the stickers, the underside of the stickers using low power microscopy, removed debris that I felt was hair or fiber debris, mounted that on a glass microscope slide, and then did my analysis on the glass microscope slide.
Okay. And what were your conclusions?
On one of the stickers, it was specifically the sticker from the shaft of the shovel. I found a very small, approximately 1/4 inch long or less, human hair that exhibited Caucasian characteristics on that sticker. The hair, based on the size and the limited nature of the hair, it was not suitable for me to compare to a known sample. So I could not do anything further other than to identify it was a fragment of hair, and then that fragment of hair was removed again from that microscope slide, and then I submitted it to the mitochondrial DNA analysis unit for their subsequent analysis.
And were you advised what the results of the mitochondrial DNA was?
I do not know what the results are, no.
Now, you mentioned that you are the section chief.
Yes.
Okay. Now, as part of the section chief, as part of your job as section chief, is it part of your job to ensure quality assurance within the quality control within the lab?
That is certainly one of the assets of the job. Within each of the case working units that are underneath me, they have unit chiefs that manage the unit, and they each have quality assurance personnel that ensure that the quality system for the laboratory and within each unit is specifically followed.
Now, your laboratory, is it what is called ASCLD certified?
It is ASCLD Lab accredited. Yes.
Accredited. I'm sorry. Okay, and what does that mean?
ASCLD Lab is an organization that will accredit a forensic laboratory. The accreditation process, there are many criteria that are established, and these are actually established by ISO.
What is ISO?
Loosely translated, it's the International Organization for Standardization. It's an international standard. But ASCLD Lab has these criteria that all the laboratories have to follow. And it's everything from the training that personnel need to have in order to qualify to work in a discipline. It's the competency tests that they have to go through. It's, do you have policies and procedures, standard operating procedures for how you conduct your analysis? Do you maintain your equipment? Do you calibrate and validate your equipment? There are management aspects. It's a very broad-reaching accreditation program. And when you volunteer as a laboratory to go through that, you volunteer to have an inspection team or an assessor team come in, assess you against all of those criteria, and determine whether or not you were meeting them.
Does a research lab have to go through these same type of rigorous criteria?
Can you be more specific?
Let me see if I read.
Outside of their expertise, it's hair examiner.
Sir, is that outside your area of expertise?
I was going to ask if he could be more specific in what he means by a research lab.
Okay.
Sir?
I can. If a laboratory is not accredited by ASCLD or another one of these organizations, are they pretty much on their own, or are they monitored like an ASCLD certified lab is?
Objection. May we approach? We have a
You may.
discovery issue.
Thank you.
Okay. Cross-examination.
So you found a quarter-inch hair in the back of a sticker.
That's correct.
Don't know who it came from?
That's correct.
Don't know how it got there?
That's correct.
Don't know how it's been there? Don't know how long it's been there?
That's correct.
Don't know what it means?
Other than it's a Caucasian hair fragment,
Okay.
no.
No other question?
Read.
Very brief. Fair to say you did a thorough examination of that item of evidence.
Yes, I did.
No further questions.
May the witness be excused. Thank you. You may proceed.
May it please the court, Mr. Ashton. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, Dr. Huntington.
Good morning.
Before we begin, do you have a cheat sheet for the court reporter?
Yes, I do.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
Sir, what is your occupation?
I'm an assistant professor of biology at Concordia University in Seward, Nebraska, and I'm a forensic entomology consultant.
And what does that mean exactly?
A forensic entomology consultant is a professional entomologist who advises law enforcement, defense attorneys, basically anyone who needs extra explanation of entomological or insect evidence.
And how long have you been doing this?
I've been doing this since 2002.
Okay. And what is your educational background?
I have a Bachelor of Science degree in biology from Concordia University. I have a Master's of Science degree in entomology from the University of Nebraska in Lincoln, and a PhD in entomology at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. I have a PhD in entomology from the University of Nebraska Lincoln.
One of the things that I will ask you to do is if you can slow it down a bit. The court reporter is taking everything you're saying, and some of these words are a bit tough to spell out, I'm sure.
No problem. I apologize.
Okay. Now, sir, have you received any specialized training in the field of entomology?
Yes, I have. My entire focus in entomology has been forensic entomology, the use of insects as evidence. I've received extensive training from various board-certified forensic entomologists in the field. I'm also a certified diplomate of the American Board of Forensic Entomology.
Let me stop you there. Are you board certified as an entomologist, and by whom?
I am. I'm certified by the American Board of Forensic Entomology. Okay. And the American Board of Forensic Entomology is the only certifying agency in the world for forensic entomology.
How many board certified entomologists are there in the country?
The American Board of Forensic Entomology currently has 15 members.
Okay. And have you written any topics or written any papers or in journals as in the field of forensic entomology?
Yes, I have. I have several publications in the peer-reviewed literature. I've also published several book chapters on the field of forensic entomology, as well as popular or non-peer-reviewed papers as well.
And and have you also conducted studies in the field of forensic entomology?
Absolutely. Since I was an undergraduate, actually, was my first study in forensic entomology and in carrion decomposition and the insects that are associated with it. As I said earlier, my entire graduate school career was focusing on decomposition in forensic entomology, as well as since then as well.
Do you also work with law enforcement?
I do. I consult as an expert with law enforcement routinely. In fact, most of my casework comes from law enforcement. I'm also a reserve deputy sheriff at the Seward County Sheriff's Office.
Bolstering does not go to his qualifications. Move to strike.
Sustain.
Ask the jury to disregard.
Disregard the last statement.
Now, have you received any honors and awards in the field of forensic entomology?
Specifically in forensic entomology, no, because as far as I know, there aren't any. Although I have received a number of awards from the Entomological Society of America, as well as the University of Nebraska in reference to my teaching as well as research.
How many times have you consulted as a forensic entomologist for law enforcement?
For law enforcement, I believe
Objection, relevance, bolstering.
Overruled.
for the law enforcement side, I believe it's around 65 times. Most of those are going to be death investigations, the majority of those homicides.
And do you normally go out to scenes? Is that part of your assignment, or do you just get material sent to you at the laboratory, or both?
Whenever possible, I like to go to the scene. It's better if someone who knows specifically what they're doing can be there to collect the evidence. So for example, if I'm relying on someone else to send me samples, I don't know for sure that they really knew what they were looking for and that they actually got all of the evidence. If I'm there, I know what I'm looking for. I like to collect my own evidence. That way I can see everything in context as well. Most of the time in Nebraska and Iowa and even Missouri, I've traveled to the scenes to collect my own evidence. Outside of that, it gets sent to me.
Okay. And have you lectured on the topic of forensic entomology?
Yes, sir. I've done a number of invited presentations to a number of different agencies. I've traveled outside the country to do that. I also taught a class, currently still teach a class at the University of Nebraska. I'm an adjunct professor there, and I teach a class on forensic entomology. I also lecture on it extensively in my own classes, in my forensic science classes that I teach at Concordia, as well as the entomology classes and even zoology classes. The students like to hear about it.
And do you belong to any professional organizations?
Yes, I do. As I said, I'm a diplomate of the American Board of Forensic Entomology.
What does that mean?
A diplomate is the highest level of membership in the board. There are currently two levels. There is the member level and then the diplomate level. The qualifications are different. To be a diplomate, you have to submit more case studies. You have to have a higher level of education, more publications, things of that nature. I actually joined the board as a member. At the time that I joined, I was the second person to actually join as a member. You have to submit case studies to show that you're an expert in the field or that you've worked in the field. You have to submit publications. You have to take an exam, which takes about 12 hours. It's a lab practical, a written exam, and then a case study exam. At the time that I joined, as I said, I was the second member to actually join.
Excuse me, objection, bolstering, can we post-mention?
You may. Objection overruled. You may continue.
Dr. Huntington, I believe we left off with your, you were talking about being a diplomate at the, for the American Board of Forensic Entomology.
Yes, sir. What I was going to say is I'm the only person who became a diplomate after being a member. The vast majority of the board, currently 13 of the members of the board, started as a diplomate. It was only recently that they allowed people to test for membership into the board. And so I'm the first person to move from one membership category to the next.
Okay. Have you been testified as an expert witness in the field of forensic entomology?
Yes, I have.
How many times and where?
Approximately 8 times. Those have mostly been in Nebraska, as well as Colorado and Florida, testifying through deposition, I guess.
At this time, Your Honor, I would move to have Dr. Huntington admitted as an expert in the field of forensic entomology.
What says the state?
No objection, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the doctor will be accepted as an expert witness in the area attended. You may continue.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Huntington, how did you get involved in this case?
I received a phone call from Linda Kinney-Bodden on, I believe it was December 11th of 2008, asking me if I would be involved in this case. She said that there was
Let's not talk about what she said.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. And then did you, at that time, come down to Florida immediately?
I flew down, I believe it was the 13th, because it was the Saturday, and I got the phone call on a Thursday night.
Okay. And what information were you given to review in this case? And let's start off what you started with and then progress from there.
Okay. The evidence that I've received, beginning with, I believe the first thing I received was the entomology reports from the state expert, Dr. Neil Haskell. Later, I came to Florida, reviewed some of the evidence there in-house at the Orange County Sheriff's Office, insect evidence collected from the scene as well as from the trash bag in the trunk of the car. I viewed the car itself. I was later sent a box of insect material. That was the majority of what Dr. Haskell had looked at in making his opinions.
Okay. Now, when you say the majority, was that because he was given later on some vacuum sweepings that came later on in the case?
Yes, there were some sweepings that were recovered from the trunk liner of the vehicle, is my understanding. I haven't received those to look at them, but I have received Dr. Haskell's report on those.
So you're aware of what species identifications there were and how many?
Yes, I am.
Insects. Okay. Explain to us, if you can, how entomology is important and how is it a science? How does it work?
Okay. Well, entomology, the study of insects, is an incredibly diverse field. The vast majority of the entomologists that you probably see at universities, especially in agricultural states like Nebraska, Iowa, Florida, are going to deal with agricultural insects, things that attack the food that we eat. There are many, many of those. The other entomologists that you might run across are going to work in the field of urban entomology, so looking at cockroaches, bed bugs, which are a big problem now, things of that nature. Forensic entomology, and specifically what's known as the subdiscipline of medical criminal entomology, deals with insects primarily and bodies, insects and dead people. Although that can be expanded to include cases where the insects have infested the person while they're alive. And I do cases in that nature as well.
If you could slow down just a little bit, I want to make sure the court reporter is catching everything you're saying.
Okay. The field of forensic entomology deals primarily with estimating the time of death. In cases where a body has sat undiscovered for some period of time. Naturally, all bodies sit undiscovered for some period of time. It's very uncommon for a law enforcement officer, for example, to be standing there when somebody dies or is killed. So forensic entomology deals with that estimation of the time of death when some period of discovery has elapsed. We refer to that in forensic entomology as the postmortem interval, which means the time interval between death and discovery of those remains. The reason insects are important is because insects discover dead bodies very, very quickly. Because they will colonize a dead human the same way they do any other dead animal. We've all seen roadkill sitting on the side of the road, and you see little green and blue flies buzzing around it. Those flies are the same ones that are attracted to a dead human body. The insects treat it the exact same way. Or if you've ever let hamburgers sit out, when you're grilling or something like that, the flies come into it, same way. So those insects are attracted to the dead body to lay eggs. They lay eggs, those eggs hatch out into their maggots, which are just larval insects.
Let me stop you there if I can.
You bet.
Would it assist you to draw out some of the, I guess, the progression that explains the PMI?
Sure, I think it would.
Okay. May the witness stand down, Your Honor?
Okay, needs a lavalier mic though, so everybody will be able to hear.
I've got it ready.
Okay.
Is this mic working?
Yes, I think so. Everyone here.
Okay, I'm going to try not to bore you with this. Students and citizens. Insects come in several different categories, and not to get too detailed, but flies are the main insects that we're talking about in this particular example. Go through what's called a complete metamorphosis. You all learned this in second grade or kindergarten or something. Most people forget about it. But complete metamorphosis is analogous to the butterflies, okay? If you know anything about butterflies or similar insects, they start out as eggs. Those eggs hatch out into larvae, which in the case of flies, we call them maggots. They're really just baby flies. The maggots start out small, same way that a butterfly starts out, a caterpillar starts out small. And they eat, and that's their sole function, they eat. As this first stage larva,
Can you write a little bit bigger? I don't know.
I'll try to do my best.
Let's try it again. That's pretty small.
My artistic talent is not that great. Better? Yeah. Okay. These eggs hatch out into maggots, which are just baby flies. And those first stage larvae, the first stage maggot, starts to feed. Insects are arthropods, and
What does that mean?
An arthropod is a phylum of animals that has an exoskeleton. The word arthropod literally means jointed foot. The way that I explain it to my students is, if you want to know what an arthropod is, if you find it in the ocean, you'll pay a lot of money to eat it. If you find it on the land, you want to step on it. So there are insects, spiders, ticks, and then crustaceans like lobsters, crabs, shrimp, things of that nature. That exoskeleton, the skeleton is on the outside of their body. And what that means is they can't get bigger without breaking out of that exoskeleton. If you've ever seen cicadas, I don't know if you have problems with periodic cicadas in Florida. Cicadas, when they emerge out of the ground, you'll find their little shells of the nymph cicadas around the base of trees. and people find them, and that's where the adult cicada comes from. And what they're doing is it goes a process of molting their exoskeleton. They crawl out of it, sort of similar to the way a snake crawls out of its skin to get bigger. Okay, it's bound by that skin. In this case, the insects are bound by their skeleton. When they do that, they'll crawl out of their exoskeleton and they get bigger. Okay. In the case of maggots and caterpillars and other complete metamorphosis insects, this isn't exactly to scale, but they're going to turn into what we would call a second stage. I apologize for the slant in my wording. I'm not used to using that.
I hope if I hold it.
Thank you. They get a little bit bigger. In the case of maggots, particularly the maggots that we find associated with dead bodies, it's very easy to tell one stage from the next because they have external, what we call morphological characteristics that allow you to look at them and very easily stage them.
Let me stop you here.
Yes, sir.
What happens once they break out of this shell? Where does that go, or what?
The exoskeleton is left behind. In the case of maggots, and caterpillars and other soft-bodied larvae, it's relatively flimsy. It has a tendency to dissolve in their feeding, or it simply shrivels up and it's so small you don't really see it. But it is left behind.
So are those of any evidentiary value?
They can be, because if you find maggots in a particular stage, and then you're able to find the shed exoskeletons of the previous stage, it can be indicative of a very close timing within that stage transition, meaning that it's been a recent change from, say, first to second stage, or in etymological terms, instar, which is slightly different.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry.
Second stage maggots continue to feed. They will molt, get a little bit bigger. They turn into the third stage maggots. The reason this is important is because the flies that we're talking about here go through 3 stages of development. Okay, 3 stages of maggots. When I explain this to workshops and things, I usually refer to these as grade school maggots, middle school maggots, and high school maggots. These third stage maggots are going to be the last maggot stage, okay, the last caterpillar stage, if you will. And when they finish feeding, they need to change into an adult, okay? And just like butterflies, who also go through this complete metamorphosis, they will pupate, okay? And the pupation, the cocoon stage of a fly happens within a structure, and I apologize for using the term.
Do you need to go to another page?
Yeah, sure, let's flip it over. Takes place in a structure which is called the puparium.
So when you say pupate, are you meaning they have to go into a cocoon?
It's the cocoon stage or the chrysalis stage. In the case of these types of flies, this is actually the exoskeleton of that third stage maggot. Inside of this, they're changing into an adult fly, okay? And just like a butterfly turns into a butterfly inside of their chrysalis, it's the same analogy. Once that transformation is complete, the adult fly is going to emerge out of this, okay? The ends pop open, they wiggle their way out, they're soft and squishy just like a butterfly is when it comes out of a cocoon. They take some time to harden their exoskeleton, to flex out their wings and let them dry, and then they fly away and do their fly business.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
While these instars are going on, does this all happen in the same place, or do they go places, or what is the? Would they stay all where, I guess, where the body is when someone passes away?
Depending on the species, and there are thousands of species of flies that go through this transformation, so there's always exceptions to every rule. Depending on the species, most of them that we deal with in forensic entomology that we find associated with dead bodies will actually crawl away from their food source. This has all kinds of fantastic ecological implications. The main reason that we understand that they do this is because they've gone from a stage that's crawling around and feeding and a very active, energetic phase to what is essentially a dormant phase. Okay, they've locked themselves into this sealed little chamber. They can't fend for themselves. They can't run away. And there are lots and lots of insects and other animals out there that will happily eat these little guys. So by crawling away from a food source, say, in this case, a decomposing body, they get away from it, hoping, I don't know if that may be humanizing them too much. They crawl away from it to prevent other insects, other animals from coming along and eating them. Because if they can hide away from the food source, the chances of something coming along, finding them and eating them is reduced.
So it's a self-preservation.
Self-preservation, yep.
And how far do they go away from the actual food source?
It depends on the species, it depends on the environment. When I teach workshops on how to collect these types of evidence, I tell CSIs and officers to look at least 30 feet away because they will happily crawl 30, 40, 50 feet. I've recovered them 60 feet away from the site of the body. I know of cases where they've crawled hundreds of feet. It depends on what they're crawling over. If, for example, we had a pile of maggots here in the center of the courtroom, which I'm not planning on doing, by the way, we could watch them crawl to the corners of the courtroom, out the door, because there's nothing for them to pupate on here. There's no good places for them to hide. If you're in a scenario where you're outdoors, there's lots of nooks and crannies for them to crawl into. They may not need to go that far. They may go as little as 10 feet.
Okay, so it all depends on the environment.
Depends on the environment.
Okay. All right, are you pretty much done explaining how? Now, let me ask you this, because I don't think this was summed up. How does this tell you how long a person has been deceased?
Okay, we can leave it here, that's fine. The insects are cold-blooded, and all organisms, even humans, are dependent on temperature. Temperature determines their development rates. Everybody knows it takes 9 months to grow a baby. The reason it takes 9 months to grow a baby for a human is because we keep the same body temperature. Insects are cold-blooded, so their temperature fluctuates with the environment. We know the rates of development for various species, and we know that...
I have an objection to the approach.
Yes.
Have a seat.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, of the jury, there's going to be a brief legal matter we need to take up outside of your presence. I'm going to ask that you step outside and we'll get back with you. You may.
Dr. Huntington, you did not conduct a postmortem interval in this case, did you?
A postmortem interval estimation?
Yes, estimation.
That's correct.
Okay. And neither did Dr. Haskell.
Dr. Haskell didn't necessarily conduct a specific PMI estimation. He did, however, say that it was consistent with such and such date, which, depending on how you interpret a PMI estimation.
Okay. Now, on July 16, 2008, there were items of evidence collected. Could it have been possible to make a determination at that time about about a postmortem interval as it relates to the maggots found in the trunk of the car?
The maggots from the trunk of the car, if you assume they were associated with a body, then yes, you could have made a postmortem interval estimation.
Okay. Was it done in this case?
No.
Okay. Are there any other opinions that you plan on, or I guess, are there any other topics that you, sorry, Judge, is that all you plan to testify on that topic, or is there more? On the postmortem interval?
With regards to postmortem interval, no, that should be sufficient.
Okay, no further questions, Judge.
Just a minute, a couple. I'll go. You can leave it there if you want. When you say that a postmortem interval could have been done, under what circumstances? What do you mean?
Again, with the maggots from the trash bag from the trunk, if you assume that they were associated with a body, rather that they came from a human body, then you could have estimated how long ago those eggs were laid, which would coincide with the time of death or an approximate time of death.
Why weren't you able to do that based upon looking at the evidence that was collected?
Looking at the evidence that was collected, for me, I could not make that assumption. For me, there's no reason to assume that those maggots came from a human body.
But if you did make that assumption, then you could make a PMI.
If you make that assumption, yes.
Okay, well, make that assumption.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. Okay, I don't have any other questions.
Okay. Any additional argument, Mr. Ashton, as to whether or not that violates the court order?
No, Your Honor, and actually, since I now know that it's about the car, then I really have no objection because the car is discussed. I thought from counsel he was going to talk about the scene. At least that's what I thought I heard him say. So now that I know it's the car, yes, that is covered in the report, and we did discuss the car. So I don't have a problem with that. I apologize if it was my misunderstanding, but I thought I heard counsel say it was the scene. So
There was another area that y'all had some slight disagreement on at the bench, dealt with some questions about the scene. So let's take care of those now, rather than
I think we have, I spoke to counsel, and we've agreed that he's not going to try to go into the issue of whether they were permitted access to the scene. It's not going to be an issue. So
Correct. We're not going to discuss
we've
that.
already talked about that, so that's fine.
okay.
May,
Any other matters we need to take up? I think it may be a good time take a short break for the participants. Any other things we need to take up?
nothing from the defense, Your Honor.
Okay.
No, sir.
Now, one of the things, Mr. Byers, did you file Dr. Huntington's report?
I believe I did.
Okay.
Yes, sir. When we had this would have been way back when we had the
Okay.
order requesting all the reports. So I'm quite certain. If not, I can provide the court with another copy.
If you file it, it's here.
Okay. May we be excused till what time, sir?
I want 5 or 10 minutes, you tell me.
5 is fine with me, but
10 minutes would be a little better.
10 minutes would be better? Yes, okay. All right.
Thank you.
5 past the hour.
Council approach at sidebar with court reporter.
10 start, so, okay. Okay, state recognized presence of a jury. Defense?
Yes, sir, we do.
Okay, Mr. Byers, you may proceed, sir.
Yes, sir. May the witness stand down, Your Honor.
Yes, sir, you may stand down.
Okay, Dr. Huntington, I think where we left off was I was asking you how does all of this tell you how long a person has been deceased?
Okay. As I mentioned, it all has to do with temperature. So I'll try not to rehash that now. Because insects are cold-blooded, their rate is dependent on temperature, like everything else. And if you know the stage that the insects are in, if you know the rate of their development, and you know the temperatures that they experience during development, it's a simple mathematical equation that you plug in, and it tells you how old they are. It's the same concept if you have any familiarity with degree days used in farming. Farmers will use the degree day concept to figure out when to apply certain herbicides or pesticides, when their crops are going to be at certain stages.
I need to ask the witness to slow down and repeat his last statement, please.
I apologize. It's the same as when a farmer who uses the degree day concept to predict when to apply certain pesticides or herbicides, when the plants are going to be at certain stages, and also when certain insects are going to be present in their crops. It's the same concept, slightly different group of insects.
So if I understand you add up the temperature with the size of the different shells, or how does, I'm still not getting it.
It doesn't necessarily have to do anything with size. The size of a maggot or the size of a juvenile insect, a larva, has everything to do with how much they've eaten. It doesn't really have to do with how old they are. The stages, however, are temperature dependent and depend on how old they are. So for example, if we have a first stage maggot, okay, that's a maggot that is hatched from an egg, and if we know that, say at 70 degrees Fahrenheit, it takes approximately 8 hours for that egg to hatch, then we know that at 70 degrees Fahrenheit, it has been 8 hours at least since those eggs were laid. When we do this in a legal setting or a experimental setting, or really anything to do with prediction, what we will do, and we being forensic entomologists, is we will take the daytime temperatures or the daily temperatures, the average daily temperature or the hourly temperature, depending on the data that are available, and we will add those up, tally those towards a number of accumulated degree days, is the term that we use, that is necessary for the stage transitions. It does get a little bit more complicated than that, but I'm trying to keep it.
No, we don't need to go there.
Okay.
Okay. So are you saying it's basically a mathematical computation between the temperature of the certain days and the stages that the maggots are actually in?
Yes, sir. If I may.
Sure.
There are really three things that a forensic entomologist needs to estimate how old an insect is. The first is the stage. It's hard to write on the edge.
That's species.
So it's supposed to be species. I apologize for my handwriting. Stage and species of the sample. The species is important because every species of insect has a different developmental rate, okay? The same way that if you have dogs and cats, they grow at different rates, okay? The stage is important because that gives us that snapshot in time where they are on their developmental cycle, as I drew out earlier. The second thing we need, and these are really in no particular order, are the developmental rates. These are experimentally constructed using known temperatures, known samples of insects. So we know how old they are, we know how long they've been there, we know what temperature they're developing at, et cetera. And we construct what's called a growth curve or a growth chart. And these are published throughout the entomological literature. This is what I did my master's degree research on a particular species of fly. The third thing we need are the temperatures.
Where do you get those?
Those temperatures, the temperatures that we're interested in are the temperatures that the insects experienced during development. Now, in the case of forensic entomology, it is very rare, although I'm aware of at least one case where it's happened, for someone to die next to a weather station, okay? Those are gonna be the places that you record those data from, the temperature data. What forensic entomologists will do, what I do, is we look for a data recording weather station. Those are maintained by the National Weather Service. Golf courses have them, homeowners will have them, universities will have them, etc. They record the daily temperature, the hourly temperatures, sometimes even to the minute temperatures. Those are generally going to be some distance away from the location that the insects are recovered from, okay? So everybody's experienced this idea that, you know, in one part of town it's a certain temperature or a certain weather activity, rain or what have you. Another part of the town, it's cooler, it's not raining, it's sunny, these sorts of things. And so what we do is we compare the scene location to that recording weather station. What I like to do is I will put a recording temperature device called a thermocouple at the scene. After the evidence is recovered, it will log those temperatures for several days, 3 or 4 days, depending on the scenario. And then you can compare those temperatures to the weather station temperatures, okay? Once you have that, by running what's called a regression analysis, you can see, okay, the scene temperatures are on average 5 degrees warmer, 2 degrees cooler, what have you. And then you can adjust the weather station data to get a more accurate reading.
Okay. Now, when you do these experiments and and in the study of entomology, you don't use actual live human beings to come up with these studies. Not always, right?
No, people tend to frown on the use of human cadavers to walk somebody out and kill them at the scene and to do a research study.
Well, there are different. There are certain places where this.
Well, you said live human cadavers, so
I'm sorry.
No, there is research being done at human decomposition facilities. The best known is the Anthropological Research Facility at the University of Tennessee, known as the Body Farm. There are several places in the United States where you can use human remains to allow them to decompose and to study them.
Are there alternate, other than human cadavers, that entomologists use to conduct studies?
Absolutely. The reason, as I alluded to earlier, most of those studies are not done with humans is because it's less controlled. Okay. As a scientist, I want to be able to know when that body died, when it got there, because these insects are so sensitive to the how long something has been dead. They can tell the difference within minutes between a live human and a dead human, or live animal and a dead animal. Knowing that, for researchers like me, I find it largely impractical to use human decomposition facilities, because where those bodies come from are donated bodies, okay? The same way you would donate your body to science for medical study, for dissection, things of that nature. And so they have been dead for some period of time, long before they ever reach the site of decomposition. We use pigs in decomposition studies.
Why would you use a pig?
Well, pigs are used for a number of reasons. One is because they're readily available. For the most part, people don't have a problem with you killing pigs for research. Everybody tends to eat bacon and sausage and things like that, so they're again available. They're cheap, and they're very similar to humans, both morphologically or physically, as well as looking at their digestive processes. They're omnivores. They eat the same kinds of food that we eat. I like to say that they're more like some humans than others, but they're a good surrogate. Okay, you can do a lot of research with a pig that you can't get away with doing on a human.
Okay. And have you done studies that relate to decomposition in the trunk of a car?
Yes, I have.
Okay. And do you have some demonstrative aids that you think might help the jury in understanding a little bit more as we talk about that?
Certainly.
Okay. For the record, I'd like to show Your Honor the jury a Defense Exhibit AV, which I have previously shown to counsel.
Your Honor, I have no objection to those being offered as a demonstrative exhibit only.
Okay. You may proceed, Mr. Banks.
Okay. Before we talk about this, I'd like for you to tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what we're looking at and a little bit of background as to what you were trying to do here.
Okay. Obviously, this is a car. I was conducting research, this would be September of last year, in Staplehurst, Nebraska, which is southeastern Nebraska. It's a small community. I had the opportunity to receive some cars from essentially a junkyard. These were cars that were slated for destruction, so there's no harm in getting them icky. What I was looking at specifically in this case, in this study, was what kind of a barrier the trunk of a vehicle will present to insects that colonize decomposing remains. There are lots of case studies in the literature where
bolstering.
I think the doctor will be explaining on information, scientific information that he has gained through us.
Sustained, doctor, just tell us what you did, sir.
Yes, sir.
Tell us what you know, not
Okay.
talking about.
In this particular case, in this study, my goal was to place bodies, in this case pigs, into the trunks of vehicles, allow them to decompose, and see what kinds of insect activity happens, how much of a barrier these car trunks pose.
Now, this is not a Pontiac Sunfire.
No, sir. This is apparently a Ford Probe.
Okay. And you didn't use a Pontiac Sunfire in your study, did you?
No.
98.
No. I used 6 vehicles. Again, they were donated. I didn't really have my pick of what I wanted. They were donated by a towing company. And so the reason I'm using this as a demonstrative aid, this is the most intact vehicle of the vehicles that I used. This one has no obvious holes in it. It is completely, this is a car that other than not working, you would drive.
And did you ever get to inspect the Pontiac Sunfire in this case?
I inspected the Pontiac Sunfire in this case in July of 2010.
And when you did that, did you look at the trunk and how much of a barrier it might be?
Yes, I did. At the time that I inspected the trunk,
Let me object. I'm not sure that his expertise is sufficient for him to give an opinion about the construction of a trunk or its condition.
Overruled.
The trunk, when I inspected it, was not in original factory condition. The liner had been removed and some other things. But what I was specifically looking for is spaces or gaps or unsealed places that allow for insects to pass through or could allow for an insect to pass through.
Okay. So you were talking about this car, and this car, did it match in that category, or generally speaking?
This is a car, as best as I can tell, that again is factory condition, well sealed, no body damage or anything like that.
Okay, so what'd you do?
What I did is I obtained pigs, had them killed. I didn't physically kill them myself, and placed them in the trunks of the car. And again, this is September in Nebraska. Placed them in the trunk of the vehicle, closed the trunk. There were no flies on the pig at the time that I closed the trunk, and then waited, watched, observed for any signs of insect colonization associated with trying to access or accessing physically the pig remains in the trunk of the vehicle.
When you say you waited and watched, you didn't actually camp out there, did you?
No, I didn't. I was busy teaching, but I would check it daily, and periodically go out there, watch for the insects, see if there were anything active. The weather at the time was not the most cooperative. It was kind of cool and rainy, but.
And why does that matter compared to? Why does that matter?
It matters because, again, insects being cold-blooded. As most people probably know, when it cools down, when it's cold, when it's winter, in Nebraska, when it's cold and wintry, we don't have bugs flying around. When it's hot and sunny, like it is now back home, there are lots of insects flying around. The cooler it is, the more it will suppress insect activity. Rain greatly suppresses insect activity. You don't see any insects flying around in hard rains, because when you think about it, if you're the size of an insect, I mean, that's like a 55-gallon bucket or barrel full of water coming down. You don't want to be out and about in that kind of condition.
Okay. So then you put pigs in the trunk of the car?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And would you like another
Certainly.
Demonstrative aid? Which one would you like to show?
Let's go with the, man. Let's go with this one. Okay, what you're looking at here is a photograph through the back windshield of that same vehicle. What is present here?
I apologize.
What's the exhibit number?
Yes, sir. My fault. Defense Exhibit AX.
Okay, thank you.
What you're seeing here through the back windshield are dead flies lining the back window ledge. And in fact, there are actually some live flies in there as well. The flies that you're seeing in there are commonly known as blowflies. Blowflies are the most common insects that colonize dead things.
Your Honor, could I object to just ask the counsel to elicit the time frame of this photograph?
I plan to.
Seems to be rather vague at this point.
I plan to, Judge. Okay, please continue.
No, Judge, the objection was, I think it's not relevant unless we know a time frame.
Let's give a time frame, Mr.
Yes, sir.
Bass.
When was this photograph taken in regards to the study?
This photograph was taken on day 10 of the study.
Okay. And this is in September?
September, yes, sir.
Nebraska. And if you were to correlate that with Florida weather in the summer, what would be your best estimation as to how many days in Florida you would see something like this?
Your Honor, I'm not sure the witness is qualified to make those type of estimates.
Are you qualified to make such an estimate, sir?
I can say that it's cooler in Nebraska in September than it is in summer in Florida.
All right, let's move on, folks.
Okay. All right.
Stipulate to that, by the way, Judge.
Okay, I guess this is you, right?
That's my shadow, yes, sir.
Okay. All right, and if the temperature is hotter, there's more bug activity, is what you're saying?
Yes, sir.
And it's cooler in Nebraska?
In September in Nebraska, yes, sir.
Okay. Since that's stipulated too, we got that. Now, tell us more. Tell us what you got going on here.
Okay. As I said, these are blowflies. Blowflies are the most important family of flies for a forensic entomologist. The reason for that is blowflies specifically key in on dead animals, okay? These are those green and blue flies that you see buzzing around roadkill, that if you leave meat sitting out too long, they're the same ones that'll show up. The reason they're the most important is because they show up very soon after death.
How soon?
Minutes to hours. So kind of the example that is frequently used is you can be sleeping in a hammock in your backyard, and these flies are out there. They buzz around your garden, you don't notice them. If you have a heart attack and die, they'll be on you in seconds. They're very quick. In fact, the fastest I've seen these flies show up to a dead animal is 13 seconds from the time that the animal was alive, it hit the ground, and the first pregnant female fly shows up. They're very sensitive to that odor of decay. The flies are trapped inside of this car. Now, these weren't there initially when the cars were placed and the pig was placed in the trunk.
And were the car doors closed?
The car doors were closed, all the windows were up, the car was sealed.
Okay. All right. Is there another demonstrative aid, or are you finished with this one? Is there anything else you wanted to point out?
One thing I guess I should point out, the fact that these flies are dead inside the car is actually of some importance. A fly that gains access to a sealed environment. For example, when we have cases where a person has died in their home, the flies will gain access, they will colonize the body, they'll go through their life cycle. Those adult flies don't fight their way out, okay? The attraction to gain access to an enclosed container, a house, a car, whatever it may be, is much stronger than the attractive force to exit the container. Okay, they don't have that sort of chemical cue that draws them out, and so they don't find their way out the same way they found their way in. So it essentially becomes a trap for them. And in fact, fly traps, if you've ever used them, work the same way. So these flies being trapped inside the car die inside the car because they can't get their way out. So that's their dead presence. That's what that indicates.
Okay. Anything else on this one?
I think we're good on this one.
Okay. Do you want to choose the next exhibit, sir?
We'll go with this one.
For the record, we'll be publishing Defense Exhibit AW. What are we looking at here?
Okay, I apologize for the somewhat graphic nature of this.
Mr. Biden, that's why I can't see.
This is the decomposed remains of the pig in this vehicle when I opened the trunk.
How many days is that?
This is on day 11.
Day 11.
Okay, so the next day after that photo was taken that I showed previously. What you're seeing here, obviously, is a decomposed pig. These whitish, I don't know what to call them. These white spots on here that you can see are maggots that have fed on this pig. These maggots are actively crawling away from the pig. As I explained earlier, they're getting away from that food source, and they're looking for a place to pupate. You can see this decompositional fluid ring here that comes from the pig as it decomposes. You'll notice that there's extensive tissue loss throughout the pig. Fly colonization generally occurs first in the head, and the maggot activity moves its way down. And you can even see that there's some disarticulation here of the skeleton, and again, that's maggot activity moving that thing around. You can also see that there are some flies in the trunk that were either inside the trunk when I opened it or were actually attracted to it as I opened the vehicle trunk.
And that material that's there, what is that black material?
The black material is decompositional fluid. It's a combination of body fluids, of bacteria, bacterial wastes, maggot wastes, maggot secretions. Maggots secrete enzymes that help break down the body. And that fluid leaches from the body as the decomposition process happens.
Okay. And is that stain distinguishable? Can you?
When you see a stain like this,
I have to object at this point. If the council's asking him to identify what the stain is, I don't believe that's in his area of expertise.
Doctor, do you know what the stain is?
Yes, sir.
Okay, overruled.
May I have a word higher, Judge? I don't believe it's in his area of expertise.
Go ahead.
He's going to question you now.
What expertise are you bringing to bear to identify specifically what the fluid is in that picture?
Years and years of experience of watching animals and humans decompose via insect activity and otherwise.
Have you ever had it chemically analyzed to know what's in it?
No, sir, I have not.
Objection, Your Honor. He has no basis to identify what the fluid is.
I will permit him to continue his testimony. Objection overruled.
We were talking about the stain.
Right. The decompositional fluid stain, most of the studies that I've conducted and even cases that I've worked on have been in outdoor environments. This same fluid leaches into the ground, very distinguishable. My colleagues at the University of Nebraska work to identify places where bodies have decomposed, specifically looking at the presence or absence of these decompositional fluids. In cases like this, where you have a mat or a carpet where the animal is decomposed, it is very noticeable, very...
Your Honor, we have another discovery issue.
Okay. Approach the side. Members of the jury, there's a brief legal matter we need to take up outside of your presence. We will get back with you as quickly as possible. Please remember all of my previous admonitions. Thank you. All right, you may proceed. The report is not filed in the court file, so at some point it would be helpful to make sure that any subsequent experts that may appear, it would help me, or have a copy available to give to me. All right, you may proceed.
Dr. Huntington, the stain in the trunk of a car, well, let me ask you it this way. Based on your experience, is the stains from decompositional fluid easily distinguishable?
Yes, they are.
Okay, how so?
Anyone with experience around decomposing bodies of this nature will generally be able to look at it, smell it, and determine if it's from a decomposing body or not. There are also relatively simple presumptive tests, chemical tests that can be done. For example, phenolphthalein can be added to the suspected body fluid or soil or whatever may be contaminated with decompositional fluid. And that chemical test is readily available.
Were you questioned about this study during your deposition?
Yes, I was.
Okay. And did you explain, or do you recall?
Objection, Your Honor. The deposition speaks for itself. It's either there or it's not. I don't want the witness trying testifying from what he thinks his memory is of what he was asked.
I think it may depend on the interpretation of the questions asked by counsel. It may be relates.
All I need is his opinion, and then there are two methods to do it. Show it to me in his report,
Yes, sir.
or show it to me in his deposition.
Sir.
It's-
Okay.
So all we need to know is what opinion he's going to give, and then we can have the attorneys argue whether or not that was disclosed via his deposition or his report.
Yes, sir. Judge, I would, on the doctor's deposition,
Which one?
I'm
He has
looking
two
for it.
depositions.
yes,
One
sir.
in January, one in December.
January 28th, 2011, page 31. The question was asked by Mr. Ashton,
Just a second, page what?
page 31, line 9 through 16. What? No, 17.
Line what?
Lines 9 through 17.
Okay, just a second. Okay, go ahead. You can continue.
In this, here he is asked specifically about decomposition in the trunk, and if you would see that, and would it be sufficient for an hour? Would a day be sufficient? Would you need a week? And then the answer was, in Florida, summertime temperatures, you would expect within a day or two, you'd see sorts of decompositional fluid staining the carpet, saturating the liner, the carpet liner inside of the trunk. I think that's an opinion that this witness gave in regards to staining and the saturation of the carpet liner and the fluid that he has described.
Mr. Ashton?
Have we finished eliciting the opinion from the witness? Because it seemed like we stopped. Obviously, he's not qualified to talk about phenolphthalein tests. We've already heard from an experienced serologist about that. So clearly, he's not qualified to testify about that, and that's not in his deposition. But is there any other opinion counsel's going to elicit? Because, I'm sorry, I'll wait. Counsel's busy texting, so. Is there another opinion?
Folks, I don't know how many times, and I'm not going to say this ever again. I do not want to hear editorial comments. Let's stick to the facts. I care less what Mr. Baez may be doing or not doing. All I'm concerned with at this time is the proffer and whether or not was in his report versus his deposition is a violation of this court's order. I do not care if Mr. Baez is standing on his head, standing on one leg. So folks, please, Let's just stick with the facts and be professional. Now, Mr. Baez, asked him the question that you were supposed to proffer so I can determine whether or not this violates this court order.
Yes, sir. Dr. Huntington, when a body decomposes, if a body were to decompose in a car, what type of fluid, let me see if I can pose this question correctly. What would you expect to see a day or two from the decompositional fluid?
The decompositional fluid that leaches from the body has a blackish staining quality to it. In a car trunk, it will leach into the carpet, and given enough time, it will soak through the carpet liner into the pad underneath. In a day or two in hot temperatures, when you have rapid bloating, lots of bacterial action, in this case, insect activity, those body fluids leach rather rapidly because of the rupturing of the skin surface of the body.
Your Honor, that is what I believe is possibly a slightly expanded upon answer of what he gave in his deposition on page 31, line 14 through 19.
Mr. Ashton?
It is not even similar to any answer he gave or opinion he gave. He apparently now wants to state that he can identify the color of decomposition fluid as opposed to other fluids. That is in no way contained in his deposition. His statements about what occurs with opinions about what occurs with decomp fluid is not contained anywhere in his deposition or in his report. And also, I would submit, are completely outside his area of expertise, have nothing to do with forensic entomology. The only reference he made to the only other reference he made to the trunk is at page 32, where he acknowledges even 2 years later detecting the foul odor. There's nothing else in here that comes close to referencing that information. So I would object to it both as violation of the court's order and also being completely outside of areas of expertise, because it's nothing to do with entomology.
This is outside of what he was asked upon. He did not identify the color of decompositional fluid. He was referring to the color of a stain that comes as a result of such. He clearly explains in his deposition that in the summertime temperatures, he would expect within a day or two, you'd see a sort of decompositional fluid staining the carpet, saturating the liner, the carpet liner inside the trunk, which is exactly what the expert has testified to, along with hundreds of other maggots. It's not outside of his area of expertise. Entomologists are involved in the study of human decomposition, that of which Dr. Neil Haskell testified to. In fact, he gave a long testimonial lecture about the different phases of decomposition and the different stages that they're involved in. So to now argue that an entomologist is not qualified to give an opinion as to decomposition and the processes of which I think are inaccurate.
Well, folks, refresh my memory as to what did Dr. Haskell testify to when he testified to, I believe, on Saturday.
He testified about the different stages of decomposition and what happens to a human body. He wasn't talking about, he later went on to talk about how the insects relate to that decomposition, but he gave a complete and total description of the processes that are involved as it relates to decomposition, the early decomposition, putrefaction in the bloat stage, and the latter stages of decomposition.
I have no objection to this witness testifying as to those generalities. The objection is to him specifically talking about identifying stains of decomposition, what they look like or don't look like, which was not discussed.
Dr. Haskell also took it a step further and identified what he believed that stain to be was that of decompositional fluid. In addition to that, he testified that the napkins and the paper towels in the trash were that of decompositional fluid. So I don't understand the distinction of allowing one expert, one entomologist, to testify as to the fluids of decomposition and what his opinion is of such.
Go to page 28 of the deposition, both of you. And read pages 28 through 32. And after you read both of those pages, you tell me, both of you, and I guess we'll get a tale of two cities as to what this doctor testified to in his deposition on page 28 through 31. And tell me how similar or dissimilar that was to Dr. Haskell's testimony. On line 15 of page 28, there's a question. It is. Is there any evidence here that one might conclude that someone tried to clean the trunk of evidence of decomposition? Answer, based on insects, no. Question, based on anything? Answer, well, in my experience, seeing things decompose inside a trunk, I don't know that you could clean it up with a paper towel. Question, well, that wasn't my question. Answer, okay. Question, my question, is there anything in this case from which one might conclude that attempts have been made to clean the trunk of evidence of decomposition? Wouldn't you agree there is? The paper towel, which and a preserve may be considered evidence that someone had to clean the trunk. Again, we're talking about decomposition in a trunk.
I would agree with the court, Your Honor. Both experts in this field have been questioned thoroughly about decomposition, the trunk, and the entomological evidence and other evidences of decomposition that surround it. And
so what is the surprise, Mr. Ashton?
The surprise is this witness is now claiming the ability to identify a stain as to whether it is or is not human decomposition. That is a fairly major change in his testimony. There is nothing in his report or in this deposition that would have suggested to me that he is going to claim the ability to identify the stain. In fact, he indicates as to Adipocera that, he doesn't claim to have identified it. He says, well, if we assume it is, so there's nothing in here that would suggest to me that this witness would claim now to be able to identify whether a particular stain in a particular trunk is or is not human decomposition, or to describe to this jury that it has to be a particular color. There's nothing in this report on that, and I would comment, Judge, it's completely outside his area of expertise. He's an entomologist.
Well, what did Dr. Haskell testify to?
Dr. Haskell never mentioned, I have to go back. I think he said that the insects would be attracted to human decompositional fluid in the napkins. Whether he, I can't off the top of my head tell you if I ever asked him about the stain. I don't recall that I did. And I certainly know I never asked him to identify the stain. That I'm absolutely sure of, because he was never shown the exhibit. It was never discussed with him. So my best recollection is that.
Dr. Haskell testified extensively on the areas of decomposition. And in fact, he did render opinions that he felt the stain was.
Just a second, I'm going to pull his testimony up now.
Sure.
I believe he testified on the 11th.
I don't even know what day it is.
It's the 11th.
11th.
Okay, Mr. Baez.
I would refer the court to 9:11 a.m. where Dr. Haskell began to discuss the stages of decomposition and then asked by Mr. Ashton.
May I look over your shoulder, counsel?
Sure. Oh, wait, this is not.
Here, if y'all want to come up here and read it, you can read it. Starts when he starts talking about opening paper towels, decomposition of fluid. Starts talking about he sent it off to get it validated by Dr. Voss. I know y'all can't see it from y'all, but what I want you to do is come up here, and then you feel free to scroll. But starting on page 14, where his answers in here. Y'all can read just as well as I can. Y'all talk about decomposition of fluid, and he gives it based upon the hypothetical. Go read it. Okay, anything else, folks?
Nothing from defense, sir.
Mr. Ashton?
Your Honor, as the portion that I read said nothing about identifying a stain or qualities of stains or anything of that sort. I have no objection to the witness testifying about the matters, as did Dr. Haskell, about decomposition in stages, and I haven't objected to any of that. It has nothing to do with stain identification, so I do believe, not in the deposition, not in the report, and it's in violation of the court's order.
The court specifically finds that it does not violate the court's order. He was questioned in his deposition about the area of decomposition. The witness presented by the state of Florida, Dr. Haskell, talked about decomposition. While every opinion, I will agree with Mr. Ashton, is not expressed there, the area and subject matter was decomposition. And it is not a major earth-shattering opinion. And to disallow this at this particular time because of some minor inconsistencies, in my opinion, would be error. So I will permit the doctor to voice his opinion, whether or not the jury finds him to be an expert. It's just like with Dr. Haskell. They talk about these things, they study these things. It's a subspecialty with insects, but Mr. Baez don't get too enthused and try to make him an expert in something that he's not. Now, if you think there are going to be other areas of surprise, I will permit you at this time, Mr. Ashton, to question him about this, since you're saying that you did not know, and that would be the remedy for this, as opposed to total exclusion, since it is a subspecialty of what something he's testified to. Anything else, folks?
The specifically is addressing the issue of his ability to testify that phenolphthalein test is a test to determine human decomposition. I have a specific objection to that being outside his area of expertise, which is obviously not serology. I don't know if the court was addressing that in general, but that specific question is a different.
Well, you can ask him whether or not there are certain tests that all, quote, folks know that you can conduct for certain things. As to the details of those tests and being able to administer those tests, that's something different. But let's see when you question him as to whether or not he can or cannot. For me to rule on that without determining his experience would be asking me to guess. Okay. Okay, I will permit the state to question him in this area.
Morning.
Morning.
Could you tell me what your experience is in stain identification?
My experience in stain identification specifically revolves around a paper published in the Journal of Forensic Identification that I participated in regarding the identification of grave soil analysis, which is decompositional fluid using ninhydrin.
Well, no, I'm talking about identification of stains on carpets or fabrics. What experience do you have in that?
Stains on carpet or fabrics?
Yes.
My experience is watching, observing dead animals and then the remains of humans that have decomposed on carpets.
How many experiences would that be?
Geez, I don't know, 20, 30?
What different colors of carpet?
I don't know off the top of my head. However many colors of carpet.
Do you propose to testify that human decompositional stains have a particular color?
I don't know that I specified human decompositional stains. Decompositional stains do have an identifiable color quality to them, yes.
What would that identifiable color quality be?
It is a dark blackish stain. In this case, as I showed in the image, that surrounds the body.
And do you have any literature to support your contention that there is an identifiable color to decomposition stains?
I believe if you look at the taphonomic literature involving specifically case study, case histories, it will refer to a blackish stain surrounding the body, as well as
Could you give me a study?
let me think off the top of my head. I can't give you a year or a location.
Or an author?
Beneke has done a number of studies, published case studies involving human remains in indoor environments.
But specifically about the color?
The color is mentioned.
Okay, it's just mentioned.
Yes.
Is that the only color that's mentioned in literature for stains from human decomposition on carpet?
As far as I know, yes.
Now, have you examined the carpet in this case?
No.
Are you prepared to render an opinion about what the carpet in this case was? What the stain was from?
I don't know that I was going to be asked about that.
But you've never examined it?
Not physically, no.
Are there any other qualities of decompositional stains that you would care to describe in your testimony?
I believe when I was talking about the specific example, I was going to talk about I believe I did talk about the smell, and then the texture.
Right. The texture?
Yeah, it's a greasy stain.
It's a greasy stain, you said?
Yes.
Okay. That's from the adipocere, correct?
Not necessarily strictly adipocere, but body fluids, body fats.
And in how many of those occasions when you've observed stains on carpet were the bodies in a bag? Specifically, 2 plastic bags.
If there's a decompositional fluid stain on the carpet and the body's in the bag, I don't know that it would make a difference because that would imply that the bag or bags are leaking.
But that wasn't my question. How many of the cases were the bodies in bags?
In my personal experience, 0.
That's all, without taking too much time, Judge, that's all I have.
Doctor, let me ask you a question.
Yes, sir.
When did you arrive at this opinion? Are you going to give us an opinion about the stain in the Sunbird car, the car in question?
Your Honor, I think what I was trying to do is describe what one would expect to typically see in a case with a body in a trunk. I don't know that I was going to be asked specifically about this particular stain in this case. I think specifically
what would you expect to see with a decomposing body in a trunk?
What I would expect to see is exactly what I showed in that picture. You'd expect to see an obvious decompositional stain from body fluid, lots of insect activity, especially dead adult insects, migrating or dead maggots, depending on the duration and temperatures, pupaриal cases, pupaриal case fragments, things of that nature.
Okay. Is there any variation in those type of stains in terms of things that might affect what you would see obviously because of cleaning or other processes?
In my experience and experience of those that I've discussed this sort of case scenario with, not specifically this case, but bodies on carpets, things of that nature, if you think it's there or you have question that it's there, it's not there. It's either there or it's not. Decompositional fluid staining is very obvious, is how I would characterize it. And I am unaware, I take that back. When these kinds of scenes are cleaned, say someone decomposes in a house, and I've seen many cases of that, where the staining has stained the floor, stained the carpet, whatever. Those are not cleaned, those are disposed of. I am unaware of any method that you could use to remove that stain.
Doctor, have you ever testified to what you're about to testify to in courts before?
I've testified extensively on decomposition, specifically dealing with car trunks in this case, only the deposition that I gave in this example, or in this case.
But have you ever testified in a court of law?
No, sir, not on this particular topic.
Okay. Why not?
Nobody's ever asked me.
Okay. And your field is insects, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Especially those dealing with decomposing remains.
Okay. What I'm trying to understand, doctor, is either through training or experience, what makes you qualified to talk about the stain and talk about what you would expect to find? And how do you relate that to this case, if any?
Okay. Forensic entomology dealing with decomposing bodies, one must attain a certain level of expertise in the field of taphonomy, which is decomposition.
Right.
Because those insects are so closely tied with stages of decomposition, the decompositional products, for example, the causes and relations to those. Virtually anyone who is an expert in forensic entomology will be an expert in decomposition just by nature. And in this particular example, I believe what I'm trying to get at is what I would expect. You know, if you lay out a scenario for me, here's what I would expect to find based on my training and experience in that particular area. I don't know if that answers your question, Your Honor.
Doctor, has anyone showed you the stain in the trunk in this car?
Physically, I've not looked at the stain. I've seen pictures of it.
And what was your evaluation, if any, of the pictures of the stain?
If it were a decompositional stain, there was substantial cleaning processes, professional cleaning, of something of that nature. There's decomposition, as I said, decompositional stains do not go away easily.
Okay. Were you, did you share that opinion with either the two counsel, the state or the defense?
I believe I did share that with the defense. Yes, Your Honor.
And when did you?
The photo, I would assume that would have been sometime in 2008, 2009, probably 2009.
And what exactly did you share with them?
I said, there's nothing that I can see that would indicate to me a decomposing body had been in this vehicle.
Okay. And did you include it in your report, sir?
I included.
No. Did you include that opinion in your report?
I did include the opinion that there is no evidence of a decomposing body associated with the insects that I examined.
Okay, but I'm talking about, I know you said that with the insects, but
Yes,
I'm
sir.
talking about upon examination of the stain.
No, sir, I did not.
Was there any reason why?
Because I was speaking specifically to the insects.
Were you told, sir, that the court expected all opinions that one would give to be memorialized and placed in reports so there would not be any surprise to either side?
At some point, yes, I was. I don't recall if that was before or after I submitted that report.
Okay. Did anyone ask you to do an addendum to your report?
In my report, I did state that that was a preliminary report, that a final report would be issued after I had viewed all of the insect evidence material that the prosecution expert has looked at. I have not turned in that report because I haven't looked at all of the insect evidence.
But sometime in 2008, you did tell the defense about that stain, in your opinion, concerning that stain.
Yes, sir. More likely 2009, but yes, sir.
Do you recall specifically who on the defense team you told that?
I assume it'd be Mr. Baez.
Okay, I don't want you to assume.
Okay.
I want to know who.
It would have been Mr. Baez, given that he's the one I talked to.
Okay. Now, why should I permit that testimony when the defense knew back in 2008 and did not disclose that? Even after the court ordered and we've had numerous conversations about disclosures.
May I question the witness?
It's one thing for him to talk about decomposition of fluids in that process, but it is quite evident to have him give an opinion on the stain in that trunk, which he knew back in 2008, and according to him, he shared but was not shared as per the court's order.
May I question the witness further?
You may.
Did there come a time, Dr. Huntington, where when you were asked by myself to issue a report in this case?
Yes, sir.
And was that because there was a court order instructing us that all experts should be filling out reports with all of their opinions?
Yes, sir.
And did I ask you to write down and issue a report on all of your opinions?
Yes.
Okay. Did I have any contribution whatsoever on your report? Ask you to leave things out or put things in?
No.
Okay. Were you asked whether you're going to render an opinion as to the stain in this car for this specific trunk?
No.
Okay. And is it your understanding, as it was laid out in your deposition, that what you would be speaking of would be the decompositional fluids and the stains that you would expect to see in the trunk of a car if there was a dead body in there?
Yes, I was under the assumption that I was going to be speaking in generalities about what I would expect and would not expect if there is a body in a trunk or not.
That is our position, Judge. We are not asking this witness to identify the Pontiac Sunfire stain and say that that is or is not decompositional fluid. It never was our intention. All that he testified in his deposition as it relates at what could happen as a result of stains, that in generalities is all we're talking about, Judge, and that he did testify to. I apologize if the court thought we were going to take that the next step further, but that was never our intention or anything.
Anything else, folks?
Just to state that the whole issue of him identifying a stain was never known to the state. Had it been included in his report, I would have asked him about it. I would have pursued with numerous expert witnesses with expertise equal to or greater than this witness about the color of a stain. I did not, because I was completely unaware that this would ever be an issue.
Oh. I'm not too concerned about the color of the stain because all stains have colors, because one has to, if it's not a stain, it wouldn't have a color to it. If a stain is a discoloration of the original color. So that's a logical conclusion that one would come to, because if there was no stain, there would be no discoloration, and you could not tell that there is even a stain. But what he will not be permitted to testify to, since it was not disclosed, is his opinion about the stain in the vehicle in question. But he can testify, because you talked about it in the deposition about decompositional stains in general, and what one may expect to see or not. But unless somebody mistakenly, and I don't think the defense would be doing it, and I don't think the state would do it, is open the door where we can drive elephants through the crack. Okay. We're all on the same page?
Yes, sir.
All right, let's bring the jury back in. Okay. State recognized presence of jury
Sir.
and the defense.
Yes, sir, we do.
You may continue, Mr. Bass.
May the witness stand down, Your Honor.
You may.
I want to check my mic. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay. Doctor, where we left off, I'm now going to show the jury State's Exhibit AY. We were specifically talking about the stain that results as of decompositional fluid. Can you
That's defense, not state.
sorry, Judge. Can you talk a little bit more about what happens as things decompose?
Sure. What you see in this picture is a close-up of the particular corner of the trunk of the vehicle that we looked at before. What this image shows is a typical scenario involving insect movement, decompositional processes occurring in a closed container. Just to orient you, this is would be the bottom left corner of the trunk that you were looking at. This is the driver's side corner. What you see in this...
And is this still day 11?
This is same day, yep.
Okay.
Probably 30 seconds after I took the previous photo.
Okay.
What you see in this photo, again, numerous maggots moving away from the decomposed remains. Again, they're looking for that place to pupate. Down here in this corner, you actually see maggots that have pupated already. These are those kind of brownish, reddish looking seeds, or they kind of look like eggs sometimes, that have already pupated. The maggots are burrowing their way underneath the trunk liner. They're burrowing into the carpet, and oftentimes when you find maggots in carpeting, they'll actually pupate in the carpet pile itself because they can kind of dig down into it, and apparently they think they're hiding. You also see a number of dead flies, and that's not uncommon because, again, they can't get away, so they die there in close proximity with the remains. And then again, you see this decompositional ring that comes from the body. And in fact, this portion here kind of trails away from the body. And that's very common because as those maggots are leaving the remains, they actually pull that decompositional fluid with them. Oftentimes you'll see a little trail leading away. In cases of outdoor remains, the decompositional fluid will kill the grass around it, and you'll see a neat little trail that kills the grass around it as well as they're doing so.
Can't you take some paper towels and just wipe that off?
I don't think you could. The decompositional fluid itself is very greasy, almost just, I don't know how to describe it. I think if you took some Crisco and melted it in a pan on the stove and then just let it burn or get disgusting, I mean, it is a sticky, greasy, disgusting kind of material. Once it soaks in there, I'm not even sure professional cleaners would be able to get that stuff out.
Has it been your experience that once, when you arrive on investigation scenes where a dead body's been on carpet or decompositional fluid has leaked onto carpet, is that carpet usually cleaned or disposed of? What happens with that?
In cases that I've worked with, in both from a simple association with mortuary services, removing bodies, as well as in casework that I've conducted, I've never seen a case or never known of a case where a carpet was cleaned, those carpets are removed and destroyed. In fact, a case that I did in Nebraska, a body decomposed.
Objection, Your Honor, not responsive to the question.
Sustain.
Give us some examples of what you're talking about.
Objection, relevance, other examples. Unless they involve a trunk liner in a carpet.
Can you give us some relevant examples?
Sustain, rephrase your question.
Yes, sir. Can you give us some relevant examples?
Well, Judge, I don't believe it's up to the witness to decide what's relevant. I think that's...
Sustain.
Can you give us a relevant example that would help you explain to the jury what you're trying to tell us about this
I
specific?
think that's kind of the same question, same objection.
Same question. You can ask the witness whether or not he has an example dealing with a trunk stain in the trunk of a car.
Can you give us a example dealing with the stain in the trunk of a car or anything like that?
Specifically with a stain in the trunk of a car, the reason these particular vehicles were used in this particular example, in this study.
Objection, Your Honor, that's not responsive to the question. The question was an example of a stained carpet in a car.
I think the witness is getting to that point, Judge.
I think they would...
Overrule at this point, but Dr. List,
It goes to
the
the...
stain on the carpet, okay?
Yes, sir. These particular cars were used because there was never going to be another use for these vehicles other than to smash them. The owner of these vehicles, the owner of Highmark Towing, gave me these vehicles specifically because they would...
Your Honor, this is not responsive to the question that was asked.
Yes, sir.
Just talk about the stain on the carpet, not why they gave them to you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's get to the point.
Can this,
These carpets were never going to be cleaned because they won't be able to be cleaned. So junk cars that will never be used again don't need to have their trunks cleaned. I couldn't have gotten away with this kind of experiment using a rental vehicle or my wife's car, for example.
okay. What else can you tell us about what you learned during this study?
What I found in this study is the barrier of the car.
Are you done with this photograph?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, have a seat. You can finish your answer, sir.
Thank you. What I learned from this particular study is that the barrier of a car, or in this case, the trunk of cars, poses very little barrier to the insects that colonize bodies. The early colonizing flies, those blowflies that show up very quickly after death, act very similar to the way people might with their own food. They're very picky. For example, if someone likes a rare steak, the idea of eating a medium well or a well-done steak isn't that appealing to them. Once it's reached a certain point in the cooking process, it's not attractive. Similarly, some people like a well-done steak. The idea of eating a rare steak, not that appealing. The flies work the same way. The flies that are attracted to the body very shortly after death will only colonize a body for a short period of time. Once the body is decomposed to that point, they won't lay eggs on it anymore. The flies that colonized the pigs in this study and that gained access to the car were those early colonizing flies that show up very rapidly after death. They had no problem colonizing, laying eggs on the remains that were in the trunk, indicating that they gained access to the vehicle rapidly after death within a day or so.
Okay. And that would be in cooler temperatures, which it's more difficult, or is it the same?
In cooler temperatures, decomposition progresses more slowly, and the attractive nature of the remains is not as high as it would be in warmer or hotter temperatures. So I actually found it interesting that given the cool temperatures that the insects were experiencing, that there were still so many of them in the vehicle in such a short period of time.
Okay. All right, now let's talk a little bit about this case. Let's get into what you mentioned some of the things that you were given to look at what the entomological evidence was in this case. Can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury if there were any of these early colonizers that were found in the trunk of the car?
No, there were not.
Okay. Were there any body parts of any of these early colonizers found in the trunk of the car?
Inside the trash bag, which was inside the trunk of the vehicle, there was a leg of what Dr. Haskell assumed to be a blowfly. It is similar to the leg of a blowfly. I'm not sure I would categorize it to that family or not.
And do you have an opinion as to whether that one leg means anything of evidentiary value?
In my opinion, one leg of a blowfly doesn't mean anything. It's something that if we look hard enough, we'd find in this courtroom, I'm sure.
Okay. But why doesn't it mean anything since it's a blowfly leg and it's an early colonizer? Why?
Well, particularly in this example, you have a car trunk, a sealed container. If we assume that there's a body in a car trunk, there are going to be many flies attracted to it. It's not going to be one fly.
Objection, counsel. The witness is commenting on the ultimate opinion in the issue. I think the question was what it means to an entomologist, not what it means to the jury in this case.
I think he's rendering a professional opinion. Judge.
Overruled.
Continue, sir.
If we assume that there is a body in a car trunk, you would expect to find hundreds, if not thousands, of these adult blowflies, given that each one of them has 6 functional legs, assuming that they're intact. You've got hundreds or 6,000s of legs that are attached to these flies. A fly does not enter an enclosed container, lose a leg, and then figure out a way to get out. They're in there, they die there, they're stuck there. I would have expected to find, as I did in these experiments, hundreds, thousands of whole dead insects, not only in the trunk of the vehicle, but also in the passenger compartment. In the studies that I conducted, many insects were found in the passenger compartment of the vehicle because they were able to migrate their way out of the trunk into the passenger compartment. In the absence of those, the fly leg literally means nothing, especially given that it was found in a bag of trash.
Okay. Why do you say that?
Well,
He didn't ask and answer. He just answered that question.
Sustain.
Doctor, what insects were observed in this case? I mean, what do we have here?
specifically dealing with the trunk and the bag of trash, most of the insects belong to a family of flies called the Phoridae, or humpback or scuttle flies. These are tiny, many people refer to them as fruit flies, small brown flies that eat just about everything. And by that I mean organic material. They're very, very common. Many people, most of us, I would think, actually have them in our homes at some point or another. And they're very generalist flies. Because almost all of them recovered from the vehicle were actually recovered from inside the bag, the trash bag. Their presence is completely expected given that it's a bag of garbage. In my opinion, they don't really mean anything of forensic value. Given that there is a bag of garbage in the trunk, they mean even less. They're the sort of insects that you would totally expect to find in your kitchen garbage or in the trash can outside your home when you take the trash out.
Okay. And what about the number or the quantity of and we're talking about the Magnocelia scalarius, right?
Close. Megacelia scalaris.
I'm learning some words here. Okay, that specific insect, are there, in your opinion, a large number that would be associated with anything of any evidentiary value?
because these insects are so small, they don't require much food. I've seen hundreds of these flies emerge from very small pieces of decomposing material. So the numbers associated in the garbage, in the trash bag, I don't think is remarkable. There's not a huge number of them that would indicate something large decomposing.
Are Magnocelia scalarius considered early colonizers to a dead body or not?
When they show up to decomposing human remains, they're typically not an early colonizer. They generally show up in late decomposition, one of the last flies that actually will colonize a dead body.
Okay. Judge, I hate to say this while we're discussing this topic, but this might be a good breaking point for lunch.
Okay. Okay, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we will recess now